Have you ever felt that walking alone makes you weaker? That being friendless means failure? What if I told you it is the opposite? The world worships connection, but the wise man knows every bond has a price. Today I will reveal why the man who has no friends, who walks alone, may be closer to power than those surrounded by applause. In every age, the crowd fears the man who does not need them. He moves in silence, speaks little, and observes everything. While others chase affection, he chases clarity. I, Niccolò Machiavelli, have seen rulers fall because they trusted smiles, and I have seen the solitary man rise, for no one could deceive him. Solitude is not your enemy. It is the mirror in which power reveals its true face. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must choose between the comfort of company and the clarity of solitude. Most men flee from this decision, for the world teaches them that to be alone is to be forgotten. But those who seek power, true lasting power, learn that isolation is not exile, it is elevation. Look around you. People move in herds, speak in echoes, and think in borrowed words. They hide behind the laughter of others, because silence terrifies them. They cannot face the voice within, so they drown it with the noise of crowds. Yet the man who walks alone hears that voice clearly, the voice of reason, the whisper of strategy, the quiet music of control. When you walk alone, you begin to see the patterns invisible to those distracted by company. You see how easily men betray their own convictions for acceptance. You notice how loyalty fades the moment interest ends. And you understand that friendship, when tied to dependence, becomes a leash around your ambition. The alone man cuts that leash. Power, my friend, does not thrive in gatherings. It grows in the silence of separation. To command others, one must first command oneself. The man who cannot sit alone with his own thoughts can never lead those of others. Solitude sharpens the mind as a blade is sharpened on stone. It teaches restraint, patience, and the discipline to observe rather than react. The world will try to shame you for walking alone. They will call you cold, arrogant, detached. But understand, this is the defense of the weak. The lonely man is feared because he cannot be manipulated. He owes nothing to anyone's approval. He does not beg for validation, for his power comes from his understanding, not from applause. Think of the rulers I have seen, the princes who surrounded themselves with advisors, friends, and flatterers. They listened to 100 voices, yet heard nothing. They believed in loyalty until it was bought by another. They mistook noise for wisdom. But the solitary ruler, the one who sat in silence before deciding, he became a phantom of fear. Every word he spoke carried weight, because it was rare. Every move he made was unpredictable, because no one knew his mind. Isolation teaches you to see the world as it is, not as others wish you to see it. In the crowd, perception is corrupted by emotion, but in solitude, truth stands naked. You begin to see that most alliances are bargains, most friendships are transactions, and most advice is self-serving. This realization is not bitterness, it is clarity. It is the beginning of independence. To walk alone is to step outside the illusion. You stop performing for eyes that never cared to understand you. You begin to act, not for approval, but for purpose. Every step becomes deliberate. Every silence becomes strategic. You no longer waste energy explaining yourself to those who cannot comprehend your vision. You conserve it, refine it, and use it where it truly matters in action. Do not mistake solitude for loneliness. Loneliness is the craving for company. Solitude is the mastery of oneself in its absence. The man who has no friends may feel the coldness of distance, but he also feels the fire of freedom. No one can betray what he does not possess. No one can disappoint what he does not expect. There is a strange transformation that happens in silence. At first the world feels distant. You feel detached, misunderstood, invisible. But then something changes. The voices of others fade, and your own voice becomes stronger. You begin to think with precision, to feel with caution, to act with purpose. You no longer need to be understood, you need only to be effective. In solitude, every man faces his true self, stripped of pretenses, titles, and masks. That confrontation is painful, but it is also purifying. When you walk alone long enough, the false parts of you begin to die. The need for constant affirmation, the addiction to approval, the fear of rejection, all dissolve in the crucible of silence. What remains is unshakable. The crowd may mock you for walking alone, but remember they mock what they envy. They crave your freedom but fear the price. They hide behind laughter to escape their own insignificance. But you, the man who walks alone, have no need for disguise. You have faced your fears in the darkness and emerged with vision. You understand that solitude is not a punishment. It is the training ground of rulers, philosophers and thinkers. When you are alone, you are no longer pulled by the desires of others. You are no longer shaped by their expectations. You become a sculptor of your own fate. You realize that the approval of the crowd is the currency of slaves, while silence is the wealth of kings. The man who understands this truth becomes untouchable, for he is bound to no one's opinion and limited by no one's weakness. So when you find yourself walking alone, do not despair. You are not losing the world. You are gaining yourself. The path of solitude is the path of mastery. It is where the weak find excuses and the strong find themselves. And though the road may be narrow, it is the only road that leads to true authority, to inner dominion, and to the kind of power that cannot be taken, because it was never borrowed in the first place. Men speak of friendship as if it were a sacred bond, a divine thread that ties hearts together. But I tell you this, most friendships are masks, stitched with convenience, held together by need, and torn apart by opportunity. To believe in eternal friendship is to believe that human desire ever stops hungering. It never does. Friendship, like loyalty, exists only as long as it serves someone's interest. Once that interest fades, so too does their devotion. The man who has no friends may be pitied by fools, but he should be feared by the wise. For he has freed himself from the oldest illusion, the belief that anyone truly stands beside him without reason. The court of life, like the courts of princes I have observed, is filled not with loyal companions, but with actors performing loyalty. Their smiles are rehearsed, their concerns strategic, their affection a form of leverage. Watch how people behave when you have nothing to offer them. You will see their true faces, stripped of flattery and warmth. When fortune favors you, friends appear like flowers in spring, countless, bright and eager to bloom. But when fortune turns her face, when your light fades, these same flowers wither overnight. Only in misfortune does a man learn the worth of friendship, and the price is always disappointment. I once said that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But understand this, love, whether in friendship or politics, is fragile, because it is built on expectation. Fear, however, is reliable, because it depends not on affection but on calculation. The friend who claims to love you may tomorrow envy you, and envy is a sharper blade than hatred. But the one who fears you or respects your power will think twice before turning against you. The man who walks alone learns that friendship often disguises ambition. Your friend may celebrate your victories, yet secretly resent them. He may share your laughter while planning his own ascent. The closer one stands beside you, the clearer he sees the steps to surpass you. And when that chance arises, he will not hesitate. Such is the nature of man, bound by self-interest, loyal only to his advantage. To depend on friendship in the realm of power is to build your castle on sand. It will stand proudly until the first wave of betrayal washes it away. I have witnessed princes fall not because of their enemies but because of their friends, those who knew their secrets, their weaknesses, their fears. A friend's betrayal cuts deeper than any sword because it comes from a hand once trusted. And yet betrayal is not always born of malice. Sometimes it is born of opportunity. If you wish to see how fragile friendship truly is, give two men the same ambition. They will stand together as long as they share a common enemy. But once the throne is empty and only one can sit upon it, their brotherhood will vanish like smoke. Ambition tolerates no equals. The closer two souls walk in purpose, the sooner they will collide. Understand this. People are loyal only as long as loyalty benefits them. Even the most virtuous man will abandon you if standing beside you threatens his survival. It is not wickedness, but nature. Men love to appear moral until morality costs them something. In their hearts they weigh every relationship like a transaction. Some pay with flattery, some with assistance, some with patience, but the balance must always favor them, or they leave. Therefore the wise man uses friendship as others use tools, with purpose, but without attachment. He understands that the bonds of affection are fragile, so he treats them as instruments of influence, not as pillars of trust. To trust blindly is to surrender your defenses. The friend who knows too much can destroy you more efficiently than any enemy, for he knows where to strike. The man who walks alone may appear deprived, but in truth he is rich in freedom. He owes no explanations, seeks no validation, and fears no betrayal. He walks through life without the weight of fragile alliances or false brotherhoods. While others are consumed by the need to please and maintain appearances, he moves silently, guided by reason, not emotion. Do not mistake this for cruelty. It is clarity. For the world is not as noble as poets pretend. Even those who call you brother will sell your name for a chance at favor. Even those who swear loyalty will shift allegiance when the winds of fortune change direction. Friendship in such a world is but a temporary truce between two ambitions. It is a cruel truth, but one that frees you. When you stop expecting loyalty from others, you stop being wounded by their betrayal. When you stop searching for approval, you stop being manipulated by it. The man who trusts no one is not paranoid, he is prudent. The one who sees through smiles does not become bitter, he becomes aware. Awareness is the armor of those who survive in a world built on deceit. To walk without friends is not to walk in darkness, but to walk in clarity. You begin to notice that your solitude gives you an advantage. You are harder to read, harder to predict, harder to control. Those bound by social obligation reveal their moves in the name of honesty. The alone man reveals nothing. His silence becomes his strength, and his detachment, his defense. Even in history, the great rulers and thinkers stood alone at crucial moments. Julius Caesar trusted Brutus and was slain. Kings trusted advisors who later opened the gates to their enemies. But those who ruled with caution, who befriended few and trusted fewer, endured. Their solitude became a fortress none could penetrate. So when the world tells you that friendship is everything, remember, it is only everything to those who have nothing else. Power does not share its table easily. The man who sits upon the throne must understand that the crowd cheers not for him, but for what he represents. And when his reign ends, their cheers will turn to silence, and their loyalty will shift to the next rising sun. The wise man accepts this truth, not with bitterness, but with calm acceptance. He smiles among friends, but his heart belongs only to reason. He listens to their words, but trusts only their actions. He walks among them, but his path remains his own. For he knows the most dangerous illusion is believing that anyone stands beside you without purpose. There is a difference between being alone and being strategic in solitude. Most men see isolation as a punishment, but the wise man turns it into a weapon. Solitude, when mastered, becomes the most dangerous form of strength. It is the forge where great minds are tempered, where vision sharpens and emotion bends to reason. It is in silence that a ruler learns to see beyond appearances, to think beyond instinct, and to act beyond influence. In the crowd, every man is a reflection of another. He speaks not his own thoughts, but the echoes of others. Surrounded by opinion, he forgets how to think. Surrounded by noise, he forgets how to hear himself. The man who dares to stand apart begins to observe the patterns hidden beneath the surface. He sees how men reveal their weaknesses in their eagerness to belong, how they compromise their integrity for a sense of inclusion. Solitude frees him from this contagion. It purifies his mind from the infection of conformity. Power thrives in separation. A prince who is too accessible loses his aura. The moment the people believe they understand him, his mystery dies, and with it his influence. To rule effectively, one must not be fully known. Distance creates curiosity, and curiosity breeds reverence. The wise man withdraws not because he despises others, but because he understands that absence amplifies presence. When you are rarely seen, your silence becomes more powerful than another man's speech. Solitude gives birth to strategy. When you are alone, you are no longer distracted by the emotions of others. You can observe, calculate, and decide without interference. You learn to read intentions, not words, to sense patterns before they unfold. The solitary thinker sees the world as a chessboard. Every gesture, every alliance, every word spoken in public becomes a move, and the fool who plays impulsively becomes his prey. But solitude demands courage. For the first enemy you will meet there is yourself. You will face your doubts, your fears, your vanity. you will see how much of your identity was built on others' opinions. Many retreat from solitude because it forces them to confront the truth, that their strength was never their own. The wise man endures this confrontation. He strips away the layers of falsehood until only clarity remains. What he builds after that cannot be destroyed by ridicule or rejection, because it is built upon truth. The man who makes solitude his strategy learns the art of control. Control over emotion, over reaction, over appearance. While others reveal themselves through impulsive words and endless explanation, he learns to remain still. Stillness is not passivity. It is power concealed. When you act rarely, your actions command attention. When you speak little, your words carry weight. Solitude trains you to measure every move with precision. Consider how the great strategists of history operated. They withdrew from noise to design their plans in silence. Their enemies mistook their quiet for weakness, unaware that silence was the sound of calculation. A ruler who speaks too much gives away his position. A ruler who listens learns where to strike. This is why solitude is not isolation, it is concentration. It gathers your energy, protects your vision, and shields you from manipulation. Those who fear solitude often seek constant company. They need others to confirm their worth, to remind them they exist. But dependency is the first chain of servitude. When your sense of purpose depends on others, you are no longer free. Solitude severs that chain. It teaches you to draw strength from within. It teaches you to trust your mind even when the world doubts you. It transforms you from a seeker of approval into a creator of direction. The man who walks alone begins to sense the rhythm of power itself. Slow, deliberate, unshaken by the chaos around him. He no longer reacts to every distraction. He observes, he studies, he waits. Patience, born from solitude, is the weapon that defeats haste. The loud and restless expose themselves. The silent and patient remain unseen until the moment of advantage arrives. The world rewards those who act with timing, and solitude teaches timing better than any master. But solitude is not merely withdrawal. It is design. It allows you to construct your identity intentionally. In the crowd, you are shaped by expectation. Alone, you shape yourself. You decide what to reveal, what to conceal, what image to project. You become the author of your legend. When the time comes to step into the world, you do so not as a wanderer, but as an architect of perception. The wise man knows that power is not only in action, but in how the world perceives that action. And solitude gives him the distance to craft that perception carefully. Do not misunderstand, solitude does not mean abandoning humanity. It means understanding it so deeply that you no longer need its constant presence. The man who spends time alone learns to observe without being entangled, to participate without being consumed. He can enter the crowd and exit it unchanged, because his identity is rooted in something deeper than approval. Every ruler, every philosopher, every strategist who ever left a mark on history carried a touch of solitude in his heart. It was in the quiet moments that they conceived their greatest ideas. It was in isolation that they planned their most decisive moves. The crowd celebrates loudly, but it rarely creates. Creation demands silence. It demands solitude. The world is built by those who endure that silence without breaking. There is a kind of authority that only solitude can grant. An authority born, not of titles, but of composure. The man who is comfortable alone radiates a quiet confidence that unsettles others. They cannot understand him, and what cannot be understood cannot be controlled. That is why solitude is not just a strategy, it is a shield. It guards you from the chaos of influence, from the instability of constant validation. In solitude, the mind becomes a fortress, and the will becomes its ruler. Every thought is examined, every impulse tested. When you finally emerge from that fortress, you carry within you a power that no flattery can weaken and no crowd can sway. You do not follow trends, you create them. You do not seek guidance, you provide it. For in the stillness of solitude, you have learned what few dare to learn, that control over others begins with control over oneself. There comes a moment when solitude is no longer a choice, but a transformation. The man who once walked alone out of necessity begins to walk alone by nature. The silence that once felt heavy becomes his companion. The emptiness that once frightened him becomes his kingdom. He no longer measures his worth by the presence of others, but by the strength of his own mind. This is the birth of a new kind of man, one shaped not by approval, but by awareness, not by love, but by understanding, not by belonging, but by mastery. At first, isolation strips him of everything he thought he needed. The laughter of companions fades. The comfort of familiar voices vanishes. The world forgets his name. And for a time he feels invisible. But invisibility is the beginning of power. When no one watches you, you begin to see yourself clearly. When no one defines you, you begin to define yourself. The man who endures this darkness learns that the absence of others reveals the presence of self. In solitude, his perception changes. He no longer looks at the world with the eyes of a follower, but with the eyes of an observer. He begins to see how easily people trade truth for acceptance, how they disguise fear as virtue, how they serve the illusions they claim to despise. He sees how the crowd worships comfort while calling it morality, and how they scorn the one who refuses to kneel before the same gods. Yet instead of resentment, he feels understanding, for he once did the same. Solitude has burned that weakness out of him. Every day alone becomes a lesson in strength. He learns to think without guidance, to act without approval, to decide without hesitation. Where others depend on encouragement, he relies on discipline. Where others seek advice, he seeks clarity. In this transformation, something extraordinary happens. Emotion begins to serve reason, not rule it. He still feels, but he is no longer enslaved by feeling. His mind becomes the throne, and his heart its loyal subject. The alone man becomes a strategist in all things. He learns that people reveal their nature through need, and because he no longer needs, he sees them without distortion. Their compliments no longer seduce him. Their insults no longer wound him. He measures men not by their words, but by their consistency. He listens more, speaks less, and acts only when advantage favors him. The solitude that once made him vulnerable now makes him invincible. There is a stillness that settles in such a man, a composure that others mistake for coldness. But it is not coldness, it is command. He does not rush to fill silence, because he understands that silence itself communicates power. The uncertain talk too much, the insecure reveal too quickly, but the transformed man lets mystery do the talking. People lean closer to understand him, yet the more they look, the less they see. His restraint becomes fascination. His distance becomes allure. His calm becomes fear in the hearts of those who depend on chaos. In solitude, he learns the subtle laws of human behavior. He sees that most people are prisoners of their impulses, slaves to their desires, victims of their need to be seen. He studies them not with disdain, but with detachment. As a general studies the battlefield, every emotion becomes a signal, every word a move, every reaction a clue. He begins to anticipate before others act, to influence before others notice. This foresight is not born of genius, but of observation, and observation thrives in silence. The transformation continues. He no longer chases opportunities, he attracts them. His solitude has made him scarce, and scarcity is power. The world begins to notice the absence of his presence. Those who once ignored him now wonder where he has gone. Those who once doubted him now seek his guidance. This is the paradox of power. When you no longer need to be seen, people begin to search for you. When you no longer seek to belong, the world begins to revolve around your silence. But solitude does more than sharpen the mind. It purifies the soul. The man who once sought to prove himself to others now seeks only to master himself. He stops fighting battles that do not matter. He stops chasing approval that holds no value. The noise of comparison fades, and in its place rises a quiet sense of purpose. He begins to act not for recognition, but for impact. His life becomes deliberate. Every word, every decision, every alliance measured like a stroke of a blade. Power, he learns, does not come from dominance alone, but from discipline. The discipline to walk away, to remain still, to wait. The man who has mastered solitude cannot be tempted easily. He cannot be provoked by insult or seduced by praise. He has learned to move only when it serves his purpose, not his pride. This patience makes him dangerous. Others rush to act. He waits for them to expose themselves. By the time they realize their mistake, he has already won. In the transformation of the alone man, Even time begins to obey him. He no longer wastes it in trivial pursuits. Every hour has intention. Every silence has direction. He becomes the sculptor of his own destiny, chipping away weakness until only strength remains. Solitude, which once seemed like emptiness, becomes his sanctuary, a space where no one can touch his mind, where his thoughts sharpen like blades, where his will grows unbreakable. Those who watch him from the outside cannot comprehend the change. They see detachment and call it arrogance. They see confidence and call it pride. But what they truly see is freedom, the kind of freedom that frightens the dependent. He is no longer chained by the need to be liked or understood. His focus is absolute, his purpose undiluted. The man who has no friends and walks alone has become something beyond friendship, beyond loneliness. He has become sovereign over himself. And this sovereignty radiates in everything he does. When he speaks, people listen. When he acts, the world adjusts. His presence commands not because he demands it, but because it cannot be ignored. Solitude has carved in him an authority that cannot be faked, an authenticity born not of inheritance, but of endurance. He has walked through silence and emerged with vision. He has embraced isolation and found identity. He has faced himself and discovered that mastery over the self is the first and final conquest from which all others flow.